Guess what? Shrek's back. After many long years, DreamWorks' big star has made his grand return, but it's not the reception that DreamWorks was probably hoping for. The internet is not happy about the new teaser. I thought we'd talk about it. That's a lot better than I thought it was gonna be. Just gonna set that here. Hi, I'm Sir Wade, and if you watch my channel for a while, you know that I used to work at DreamWorks, and I actually have been waiting for this announcement for years because they talked about Shrek 5 back when I worked at the studio. They pitched it, so I have a version of the story in my head of what was originally discussed. Now, it's probably changed since then, who knows? And even if it has or hasn't, I can't talk about it anyway because that was all under NDA. The secret of Shrek is... But what we can talk about is the teaser they just dropped. Because I think it's fair to say that the internet is not taking this well. Because there are definitely some differences in the current iteration that we are now seeing of the Shrek universe versus what we are familiar with. And I wanted to talk about that because I think there's some really valid and constructive criticisms when it comes to the online response. There's also some really terrible takes that I thought we could just address some of this stuff and talk about, and what happens when you bring back a character who's been gone for almost 20 years. When did Shrek 4 come out?
In 2010.
15 years then. Now, first off, just in terms of like the teaser itself and the whole like intro mirror meme thing, for those who are on TikTok and who are chronically online and know what those memes came from, they'll be familiar. That doesn't mean they're gonna be funny. DreamWorks is no stranger to really cringe teasers. If you remember the Trolls teaser, that was pretty atrocious.
Dance and have lots of fun.
Oh my god.
DreamWorks has a really bad habit, in my opinion, of trying to jump on board the social media train of like, oh, this is trendy and funny, let's like use that in a teaser. The cycle of these things is very quick. So for somebody working in social media or marketing for an animation studio, by the time they come up with the idea, pitch the idea, the conversations are had, the things are planned, we go into the pipeline, we make something animated, it goes all the way through, get to rendered, get to put onto the social media team, that trend has long since died. And it becomes very unfunny. And DreamWorks' trailers in general are somewhat controversial. I've even talked to directors at the studio back when I was there who didn't like the trailers for their own movies. I will name no names, but I'd like to point out an example of DreamWorks' trailers being extremely spoiler heavy. If you go back and you watch How to Train Your Dragon 2, the trailer, it reveals like half the plot. I mean, this is a pretty common thing. We see this a lot in trailers now, but DreamWorks was really, really bad about it, and they still are.
But a mother never forgets.
But I'm getting off topic. We're really here to talk about the characters, the look and the feel of how Shrek and friends have sort of appeared on screen for the first time in a long time. Now, most people think this is the first time we're actually seeing Shrek as like the main hero character since Shrek 4.
Hear the roar.
It's actually not his only appearance, and I'm not necessarily referring to just the intro title sequence that DreamWorks made a few years ago. We go through the major franchises, we see Shrek and Donkey on screen. Some people online have complained, you know, that's my Shrek, why don't they just use that character model? I would guess that that is not feature animation ready. Like, that was not developed for a movie, because movie characters have to have a lot of controls, a lot of detail, a lot of stuff going on, so that the animators have all the tools they need to make a character that's ready for movies. And I could be totally wrong on this, but I would guess that that model of Shrek is actually the same model and the same character used here on Swamp Talk with Shrek and Donkey. A lot of people don't know about this channel, but DreamWorks had been making these shorts with Shrek and Donkey on YouTube. This is a motion capture performance of Shrek. And this Shrek asset, based off the original design of Shrek, was actually created to work with the new animation system, Primo, at DreamWorks. And for the last, well, I don't know if they've been using it for the last 10 years, but about 10 years ago, that's when this was being used to create these motion capture little short skits on DreamWorks' YouTube channels as little things for kids. Now, this is really uncommon. DreamWorks does not typically use motion capture for their movies, for their hero performances. They use motion capture for sometimes layout, camera stuff, sometimes they'll use it for special projects, roller coaster, theme park development, all kinds of things. Maybe crowds and cycles, I'm not entirely sure, don't quote me on that. But it's not typically used for characters in movies. These shorts, however, are the motion capture actors who have, it's voice doubles. It's not Mike Myers, it's not Eddie Murphy, it's actors in a mocap suit doing the voices, doing the performances.
Oh, you are gonna do it? Oh, well. When you said knock yourself out, I thought you...
If you want to intro the show, Donkey, by all means, knock yourself out.
And then artists and animators come back and they actually take this and make it good, because raw motion capture data is never what you want. I've got a whole video on that, by the way. I bring this up, though, because most people don't know that this version of Shrek and Donkey exists, that in the last 10 years we have had a modern technology version of the characters that functions. And you can see that this looks like the Shrek we all remember. So, coming back to our point for today, what's going on here? The main criticism that people seem to have is that this doesn't look or feel like the original Shrek that they know and love. And I think that there are some good points to support this. The design of Shrek has been updated in this. There is some stuff to be said about expression, camera angle. It could be the animator's choice because you can actually do quite a bit shot to shot, morphing the character through the controls. So there's that, but typically you're gonna try to stay on model with the cohesive look of the rest of the movie. There are some changes though. Shrek's eyes are a lot rounder, they're a lot closer together. There's actually this great edit somebody made where you can see the difference before and after widening the face on Shrek. Shrek has become more appealing from a very like animation textbook kind of way. Typically, closer together eyes, big round circles, it's all very friendly, it's all very nice, it is more cartoony, but it's appealing. DreamWorks had this more realistic style, especially with Shrek. The characters were way more realistic than anything we were seeing in 3D at the time, and even since, DreamWorks has typically been the more realistic of 3D stylized looks. And that's not consistent from movie to movie, like Boss Baby's really cartoony, The Bad Guys has great stylization. But if you take the spectrum of DreamWorks' style and you take the really stylized movies over here, you start to move this way, you pass by How to Train Your Dragon where we have more stylized realism, and you eventually land at Shrek, where it's really realistic looking by comparison to anything else. And in general, DreamWorks is sort of known, at least to me, I always grew up thinking that DreamWorks had this thing they always did where the eyes were really far apart. Croods did this, Home did this, Shrek did this. There was always this like, not wall-eyed, but like the characters always just had eyes really far apart and small. I remember when I was younger, I really didn't like that. I remember thinking that The Croods was gonna be a bad movie because like,
I don't want to watch this movie about these like ugly caveman characters. They look terrible.
this was before I got into animation, and then I watched The Croods. Great movie, loved it, but the character designs actually originally turned me off to watching the movie in the first place. I say this only to point out that DreamWorks has always been known for a certain type of look, and Shrek falls right in that category of these far apart eyes, more realistic characters. And this version of Shrek doesn't follow that pattern. Obviously Donkey looks very different in this frame, but I do want to draw some attention to the very beginning of the trailer. A lot of people are skipping over this. In general, it's been several years. Shrek and Donkey are older, so we're gonna have some differences. They're gonna be a bit more weathered, let's say. Crow's nest, wrinkles, things like that are gonna be different. But if you look at the first frame, Donkey looks a lot more like Donkey, at least in terms of like the frame everyone's using in the images where, you know, his ears are all down and he's got this like crazy hair thing. He looks less mangy in the beginning than he does later on. He's got way more like texture in the fur going on. But like thickness of his neck, the overall shape of his nose, like his eyes are closer together. It's not just that particular shot and the way he's posed, there's definitely been a redesign. And by the way, if all this talk of behind the scenes and animation and posing has piqued your interest and you want to try animation yourself, I actually worked with Skillshare to create an entire series of animation courses for beginners. I go through several different workflows showing you how to animate in Blender and from Maya from scratch, how to plan out a shot, how to begin blocking out the shot, and how to go all the way through the end of that process. I tell you this because I'm actually very proud of those classes and because Skillshare sponsored this video. But what's nice about the sponsorship is I can tell you about the class that I did for Skillshare. Obviously the platform has a ton of videos and a ton of courses you can take to learn new skills, to try new things. If you want to try taking a character design course or some kind of a 3D modeling course and try your own hand at making Shrek the way you see fit, I'm sure that would be a video that would perform well on social media. If someone hasn't done it yet, count on that in the next week that we're gonna start seeing, I fixed Shrek, and those videos are gonna pop off. That could be you after learning through Skillshare. But using my link, you can try out Skillshare free for 30 days, which is more than enough time to actually take my entire series of classes that I created. There are 4 animation-specific classes and 4 additional study labs where I go into more specific things, how to create the glass shatter effects, how to work with the graph editor and do like a jumping animation. I have a class on how to get and receive feedback, which is great regardless of whether you're already learning animation, maybe you're already in animation school, or you just want to pick up some extra skills. And as part of these Skillshare courses, I even have downloadable forms, handouts, resources that you can use to figure out how to work with video reference, how to block your shot, spline your shot, polish your shot, even if you have no prior experience with animation. Because while I do have my own entire course on how to work with Maya and Unreal Engine for animation, these are courses that I made to be really accessible because anybody can join Skillshare, and with my link you can get the full 30 days free, as I said, to take all these classes without paying anything. And the first 500 people who click the link in the description or scan the QR code on screen can take advantage of all the courses that I created for you or watch anything else that Skillshare has on their course platform. So I'll have all of that linked in the description down below. And a huge thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Now, back to the swamp. This is where things get a little bit subjective because on one hand, everybody doesn't like the redesign. They want it to be the Shrek they know and love. On the other hand, can we expect that? Because this isn't necessarily, I mean, Yes, it's Shrek 5, but it seems to me, and I could be wrong once again, but it seems to me that Universal, Comcast, NBC Universal, parent company that owns Illumination and DreamWorks, right? Like the whole organism, right? The whole corporate entity, the whole thing. Why would they just bring Shrek back for one movie if they can get more out of him? Now, maybe they're just gonna do Shrek 5 and that's that. And it's just kind of a, I don't know, like an anniversary style reunion of the cast. I can't imagine that the original cast is gonna come back for more movies because they already kind of stopped doing Shrek. And it's surprising they got everyone back, which is really cool. But I would bet that NBC Universal is hoping that with this new Shrek, they can sort of retire Shrek, Donkey, Fiona, the main cast that they don't want to keep paying for those actors again after this one kind of big hurrah. They probably want to create a new generation, a new franchise of Shrek, with Shrek's kids and whatever the characters are going to introduce. Again, I have no idea, this is all speculation, but because it's been so long and they have the potential to create a new cast of characters that people would then come back and spend money on to watch more movies, watch the TV series, the shows, the YouTube stuff, the merchandise, whatever it is they're going to do, this is one step short of a reboot. So for them to change the look of the Shrek universe is not all that surprising when they're not necessarily trying to uphold Shrek himself, but use Shrek as a vehicle to bring us a new franchise. This version of Shrek might just sell better. It does kind of make sense if you consider that maybe this has something to do with the producer of the movie being the same producer, Chris Meledandri, who is responsible for Despicable Me and the Minions and the Super Mario Bros. Movie. Franchises that have made ungodly amounts of money for Comcast, NBC Universal, and Illumination. Like I said, these changes could be related to sort of the look for the younger audience to get them to connect to these characters more. If they're not going to resonate as well with Shrek having his eyes further apart the way that we all remember him, that might have to do with how, when I was younger, I didn't want to watch the Croods because that choice turned me off to the characters. This might just be based on make it as mass appealing as possible to an audience that's going to bring in as much money as possible for these companies. Because again, that is also what we're seeing on the production side of DreamWorks as well, with the outsourcing, the cuts, the layoffs, and so on with our industry. But jumping back to the differences, Magic Mirror, obviously, he's much more of a Chad now. I don't know if that's because of the memes or if that's just the new look, who knows? Shrek and Donkey, as we've talked about, they are older, they're going to look a little bit different, but for sure it's like the eyes. It's the face shape being squished down. Shrek has a new nose. His chin is a little bit less pronounced depending on the angle. It's hard to tell. Some of the older stuff, he had this really giant wide chin. This, I would imagine, is actually a lot easier for the animators to control his face and do more expressiveness with. So some of these changes might be based on just function of being able to get a good performance out of him. But again, he does feel off model. There are frames where he just doesn't really look like the approved version of Shrek we're familiar with. And I think if those particular faces had been in older movies, they would have been redone. People would have said, nope, that's not Shrek, fix it. And watching this, I wondered if it was actually the DreamWorks animators making this teaser. Sometimes teasers are made by outsourced companies. Sometimes it's made by a different department than the actual feature animation team that does the movie. Especially now with DreamWorks outsourcing, what is it, 20% of their productions out to Sony for certain movies, or working with Jellyfish, a smaller studio, to make some of their movies. Like DreamWorks is doing all these different tests to outsource, which we can talk about in another video if you're curious, let me know in the comments. But the way DreamWorks is making their movies is changing. And there's a chance that this animation was not even done at the DreamWorks feature campus. I'm not saying that that's likely, I'm just saying it's possible. Because it's not like this is bad animation, it's just not what everyone's used to. I did notice one thing in this finger swipe. Shrek does his second finger swipe and his hand locks into position. Like if you look really closely, his hand does the first swipe, and then he does the second swipe and it locks for a second. Like the hand just freezes on screen, very briefly, which is something that I would think a note would have got, like that, I feel like that would have gotten caught at DreamWorks feature. And maybe it just got through, maybe it wasn't DreamWorks feature, I don't know. It's hard to tell. But back to the characters, obviously the shading is different, the lighting is different, the textures are gonna feel a little bit different, and that's not a bad thing, because Shrek is a really old movie. 2001 was the first Shrek, it was DreamWorks' first 3D feature. No, that's not true. Ants was their first 3D feature. I guess we kind of forget about Ants. Pinocchio, he looks, I would say better. I think he looks better these days. A little bit fuller in the face. I think it works for him. Fiona is the one, I think, she looks the most like off-model, for sure. I think Fiona does look very different. And I think this is kind of a mix between just the way she's been animated and her design. Because Fiona did have a different face shape, different facial features that were more pronounced. She had a much more pronounced, like, lip well, I don't know what you call this thing in the middle of a lip, and along with the eye placement and different things like that. Like there were certain just features that made Fiona recognizable. And those features have all been softened, so she doesn't feel like the same character, but also things like her teeth don't show in a lot of the stuff. Now she's saying mama.
Ooh, mama like.
Who's making?
And as I just said it, like you might not see my teeth very much, but she does seem like the old lady gum thing, like she feels off. Her teeth come back, but just overall, she does feel like different. Is it animation? Is it the character model? Is this gonna be the case for the entire rest of the movie that we have yet to see? No idea. This is not nearly as bad as the Sonic debacle from a few years ago though, because the original version that we saw of Sonic was an absolute sleep paralysis demon nightmare. That was not good. That was very much like, I don't know who that is, but it's not Sonic. When they did the redesign, they did an amazing job. They took a lot of time, a lot of effort went into fixing that. And again, I think that was a production issue. Like that wasn't the artist's fault, that was an executive issue. I don't think this is nearly as big of a deal. A lot of people are really, really pressed about it. Personally, I'm with everybody in terms of like, I liked the old Shrek design. I liked the less appealing, ogre-y, like I would prefer Shrek to look a little bit worse, to look less appealing, as an homage to the origin of the character and kind of where the studio came from and that style that DreamWorks is known for. I like the edit that somebody made. This does feel more like Shrek to me. But another thing to discuss is that sometimes it's not actually the character model. Sometimes it is truly just the way the characters pose. And I don't mean to be coming for any animators here. I hope like I'm not ragging on anybody, but you see this from feature to TV. Right? Megamind in the movie, Megamind in the TV show. Boss Baby in the movie, Boss Baby in the TV show. All these characters that we're really familiar with. There was tons of time, tons of money put into developing the characters, the assets, the artists, and the training that goes into that, and the time just spent getting to know the characters, character leads, developing these style sort of guides and pose libraries and all these different things that really make sure that everything feels correct to that character. There's not time for all of that in television. Sometimes it's argued that it's a skill issue. I think more often than not, it's a time issue. But as an example, the Boss Baby character rig, when you open it up in DreamWorks' Primo software, it doesn't look like this. This is what the animators have created as like the default kind of base pose for Boss Baby. This is the on-model Boss Baby. The actual default rig opens like this. And that's not a bad thing if anyone's like, oh, but it looks so much worse. Like, no, that's necessary for the way you have to create these characters so that all the rigging work can be done on kind of the most neutral state of the character. And then from there, you push. And that's what you see in the TV shows, that everything feels a lot more neutral. They feel a lot less personal and specific and much less tailored to who that character is. And so anyway, that could be something that we're seeing here.
Hear the roar.
Oh, and you know what's really funny, and I don't understand this at all. Some people are really excited that Shrek is now in the Puss in Boots art style. No, just as others have been really upset that Shrek is not in the Puss in Boots art style. It's funny that people both think that it shows how little people know about animation, which is fine. Like, it's not their job to know. It is not at all similar to the Puss in Boots art style, which is much more stylized. It's got a more painterly quality to it. Like, there's way more going on with that movie. And for anyone who's upset that, like, that's not what we got with this Shrek, isn't that kind of the whole point of what everyone's mad about? Like, to change Shrek so much from what we had to something new is not going super well. That's Puss in Boots' art style. That's from that movie. While that character exists in the same universe, the Shrek art style has never been that. Animation being on 2s or 1s and the things that they did with Puss in Boots, that's all great. That would not feel true to Shrek. So I think it's a good thing that we don't have that art style in Shrek, and it's just kind of funny seeing how some people are really mad about it, and some people think that that's what we have, but again, they don't know. That's all right. Also, I don't think it would be a bad idea to give Shrek eyeliner. Like, specifically to give like his eyelashes more definition, only because that was such a big part of his look. All the detail in the eyelashes created this more stark outline of his eyes, as if he had eyeshadow, or not eyeshadow, what do you call it, mascara. If he essentially had mascara on, right? I actually think it would make him feel more familiar, because that was sort of a thing that he had, not because he had the makeup, but because the shadows around his eyes just were more defined.
Do it.
Oh, this is one more thing that this one baffles me. Everybody wondering where are the other two? Where are the other two? Shrek has 3 kids. There's only one on screen. Where are the other 2? Where are the boys? The answer's pretty obvious. Shrek ate them, right? It's an ogre thing. You wouldn't understand. It's just ridiculous. Like, they're not on screen. It's a 20-second teaser. There's so many characters that we didn't see from the Shrek franchise. Like, where's Gingy? Where are the 3 little pigs? Like, where are the blind mice? They're just not on screen. What do you mean, where are they? But everybody seems to be very concerned about Shrek in general. And again, we're not gonna know for a while. This movie's not coming out for another year and a half. All we have to go on is a teaser trailer, and that's it for now. So we have to wait and see. But I'm very curious to hear your thoughts. Did you even realize these changes were made the first time you watched? Like, did you even notice and just enjoy the trailer? Or did you kind of show up with the headline in your mind already so that when you watched it for the first time, you were like, yeah, it does look weird. Like, where were you the first time you saw this? And how has your opinion developed since? But let me know in the comments. As always, thanks so much for watching. I'm Sir Wade. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe if you want to see more animation content like that. A huge thank you once again to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. And as always, see you in the next video. Still not as bad as I thought it was gonna be. Ogres are like onions.